I'm really excited today because I'm interviewing Sean Hill. If anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Fay Petcher. I'm a teacher and part of the mental health and pastoral team at Holy Rosary Voluntary Academy, which is under the bigger St. Ralph Sherwin Mat of Derbyshire and surrounding counties. And I'm so excited because I've got with me today someone who I look up to. It's Sean Hill. I see her as an expert in parenting, in trauma and things like autism. And I'm going to be doing a little interview with her today. So hi, Sean. It's Sean. Sorry. It's really nice to have you with me. And I'm so excited. Would you just like to introduce yourself to everyone that's going to be watching?
Of course. And thank you, Faye. And thank you again for inviting me to have this conversation with you, because it's such an important conversation. So yeah, for anyone that doesn't know me, my name's Sean Hill. I'm a therapeutic coach, an educator, and an early and developmental and relational trauma specialist. And basically what I do is I teach parents and professionals how to work with their nervous system so that they can show up in the best possible way for themselves and their kids, so that they can nurture and support themselves and their children, the children that they care for and work with in the best possible way. And as part of that, I also teach parents how to heal themselves and their children and break generational cycles of trauma. So essentially, I kind of specialize in challenging behaviors, parents and children who've experienced trauma, and also supporting children who are autistic or have a PDA profile or have additional needs. So yeah, I've got a very unique approach and way of looking at things, as you know, as a result of professional experience, but also personal experience as well, because I'm a single mama. I've got 3 young people now. They're 17, 18 and 22. But like, I really get this, because it's not just about the learning and the study and the training that I've done, but also having lived through so much stuff myself as well. So I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so grateful to you for inviting me to be part of this conversation.
Thank you, Sean, for being here. And I know today we're going to be talking about something that is both very close to our hearts, and that is the impact of lockdown, you know, helping children transition into going back into the classroom, and talking about how parents can help, what teachers can do, because, you know, it's going to be happening hopefully in March. And I think it's something that's worrying. You know, I'm a parent and I'm worrying about how my children are going to transition back into school. And I kind of want to ask you, Sean, how do you think lockdown has affected not only children, but parents as well?
It's had a huge impact, and it's a really great question. But how it's impacted parents and children and adults as well, because this is like teachers and other professionals around the child, or anybody in general as well. It can be in very unique ways as well. Like, there's not a one size fits all as to how lockdowns and our current times are affecting anybody. So to kind of help people understand the impact that lockdowns have, I thought it'd be really useful just to give a really basic science lesson. It will be really basic and simple. So if anybody already knows some of this, like, please know that this is just to help guide people who don't know this stuff yet. Historically and traditionally, we've all been taught that everything is about our brains, our higher brains, and our cognitive thinking and skills. And while they are absolutely essential and they're important, they're part of how we learn and grow, especially in education, and they're what make us uniquely human. Everything that we experience comes from our body. All of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors come from within our body, and they actually emerge from our nervous system first. So to understand what's going on for us and for our children, it's really important that we understand the basics of how our nervous systems work and polyvagal theory. Because polyvagal theory, that was created by an amazing researcher and scientist, Dr. Stephen Porges, has completely transformed the way that we understand behavior, emotions, communication, attachment, relationships, trauma, basically anything and everything that impacts human beings. So what we now know is that our nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, drives everything that we think, feel, and do, often without us realizing. And there are three different and distinct and separate parts to our nervous systems. So we've got our social engagement part, where we feel safe, we feel connected, we feel engaged with people and the environment around us. We feel at ease in our bodies and in the environments around us and with the people around us. And it's where we're present and we can learn, we can develop and grow and thrive. And it's an essential component for health and well-being for all of us, whether we're adults and for our children. But it's essential to understand with our children in particular, because they are still developing. They're not fully developed human beings like you and I are. So that's the first part of our nervous system. The second part is our sympathetic nervous system. And this is what gets everything moving. It's what increases our breathing, gets everything, our blood moving around our body, increases our heart rate. And we need it to breathe. We need it to exercise, to run around. It's an important part of play, but it's also where our fight flight instincts live as well. So if there's anybody that doesn't know what they are, that's okay. Our flight instinct is basically where we don't feel safe and that we sense there's a danger. This isn't a cognitive or a conscious awareness. It's what our nervous system perceives in the environment around us. It senses in the environment around us. So it's not something we can control. It happens outside of our conscious control. So if we don't feel safe and we detect a danger or threat, the first thing our body will look to do is to flight. It will look to, can I get away from this? What do I need to do to move away from this so I'm safer? Now, if we can't do that, it'll move into fight, which is, this thing is upon me. I need to defend myself. I may need to attack that thing in order to defend myself. So that's the sympathetic nervous system. And then the third part of our nervous system, which is our most primitive part of our nervous system, is our shutdown part. And this is where our freeze response lives. So if we can't flight, we can't fight, and we need to go into a freeze response, this is where it's a spectrum of responses, but it's essentially where we want to play small. We don't want to be seen. And at the other end of the spectrum, it could be literally like with animals playing dead, because that's the safest option we have right now to be able to survive. So shutdown is also a really, really important part of our digestion. And all of these three parts working together are how we navigate the world around us. One part isn't more important than the other because we need all of them to be able to survive. But we want to be able to spend more of our time in our social engagement part of our nervous system, which is what is so challenging for so many people right now, both adults and children, because even if we are physically safe in our homes and in the environments around us, which I know sadly a lot of people aren't as a result of lockdowns, and my heart goes out to them, and I know it does for you as well. Even if our environments around us are safe, our nervous systems are picking up on danger and threat cues from the environment and the people around us, especially because there's this nervous system paradox going on where the people we're looking to for safety cues, because we feel safe as human beings through connection, are maybe bringing us danger cues. They may be carrying an invisible threat. One of the ways that we detect safety as human beings is through facial expressions. And when we walk around now, people have got masks on. So that in itself can bring a lot of danger cues into our nervous systems and to our children's. So what's been happening with lockdowns, and this is why that basic understanding is really important, is because what lockdowns have essentially done is put us into a physical shutdown state. state. Now, when we're in safe and social, we feel safe. When we're in sympathetic, everything is about danger and either getting away from or defending against that danger. And when we're in shutdown, it's about our life is under threat. Now, it may not be that we feel or think our life is under threat, but biologically and in our bodies and nervous systems, that's what it comes down to. Like, my life is under threat. So it's kind of like a ladder. And as we go further down into survival mode, we go through sympathetic into shutdown. What happens is we become more disconnected. We have less choices available, or we feel we have less choices available to us. And we feel more under threat. So, like I said, lockdowns have essentially put us into a shutdown state where we're more disconnected. We don't have access to the people and the routines that we're used to. There may be a lot of stress going on in our environment. We have less choices. We can't go out and do the things that we normally do in the way that we do them. And how that impacts an individual, it will be very different. Excuse the fact that my phone is ringing in the background. It's like, this is the beauty of live.
Yes, we're not editing this at all, are we, Sean? So,
and this is real life. So how that shows up for an individual can be very individual and very unique. So for some people, that could mean being very withdrawn and it being very obvious that they're in that shutdown state. They could be very withdrawn, disconnected, very numb, not have any energy, not want to do anything, not want to engage with anything. And it's important to recognize that in that state, it's because they don't feel able to. It's not that they don't want to. Like if you've got children that are struggling to engage with education at home right now, it's not necessarily because they intentionally don't want to. It's because actually it's what's going on within their nervous systems and their bodies. So it could be looking like that. It could be that they're to defend themselves from being in that place, they're living in more sympathetic energy. So it could be that actually they say, no, I don't want to do that work right now, or they're not listening, or you're struggling to have the relationship with your children that you want to be able to have with them. It could be that you're trying to defend lots of different things about where you are. It could be belief systems, identity, lots of different things. Like I said, it could be more flighty, where actually children or you are feeling very anxious and they're constantly needing to move around and do things, which I know from personal experience can be really challenging, especially if you're stuck in a house and you can't get out very much. So it can look different ways. And it's an important piece of this is also understanding that when we are trapped in shutdown, or when we feel we're trapped there and we really don't feel safe enough, our life is under threat, what also can happen is that we adapt to that. So this is where it's more of a fawn response, where we basically look to comply. So because we like, well, I need to do what I'm told. I need to do what everyone's telling me to do because that's what feels safest right now. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's how we feel safe. It just brings us a sense of safety in amongst all of that threat and all of that chaos. So for children and parents right now, there's like so much stuff going on. And it's very, very individual and unique what's going on for them as well. What could be going on for one parent or one child could be very different for others, and even within one household. So like you could have 3 or 4 children in one household who are navigating this in a very, very different way, which obviously, as you know, brings huge challenges for parents. And it also brings challenges for teachers and support assistants in schools as well, because they're all there together in the same environment. So this is a really important conversation for us to have, not just with where we are right now, but also then about transitioning back to school, because these three states in our nervous system, in our bodies, how we look at, engage with, and navigate the world around us. There are hierarchy of responses. Like I said, we have no control, physical control over them. They'll go where they need to go in order to help us survive. And we move down through them as the threats and the danger around us or within us increase. And then as they decrease, or as safety comes on, we have more safety in the environment around us, in our bodies, and with the people around us, we need to move back up through those responses. So we saw this in action after the first lockdown.
Yes.
When things were moving around then, what's happening is, as we emerge from that shutdown state, we need to come back into a sympathetic state in order to come back to social engagement. So this can mean, like, all of a sudden, where somebody has been very withdrawn or very quiet or very disconnected, all of a sudden they're feeling very anxious, or they've got a lot of sympathetic energy, they're fighting everybody, or their behavior is very fighty. And it's important to recognize that it's because they're coming out of it. Now, as part of that, that can also feel very scary for the individual too, because when you're in a shutdown place, you're not feeling stuff as much. And then when you start feeling things again, that can be terrifying. And also knowing that that's coming can be terrifying as well. So when we look at the possibility of restrictions and lockdowns easing and the transitions back to school, we need to recognize that, number one, we're going to be coming back up through our physiological states, but also that could look very different for many different people. So when we look at this as a whole, this is our best indicators and the best way of looking at behavior, health, and well-being as well, because all of this drives everything. It drives our mental health, our emotional health, our physical health, how kids learn, how we learn as adults as well, and how we engage with the world. Because in order to learn, in order to heal, in order to thrive, we want to have good access to our social engagement state. And when we're not there, then we struggle to learn. We struggle to navigate the world around us. Everything feels so much harder. And it's really, really important for us to understand that as parents, and if we're caring for and working with children and supporting them as well, because while children can and do learn in their survival states, actually what they're learning is about survival, not the things that we want them to learn the most. So, like I said, lockdown is having a huge impact, but what that impact is can look very different. And the important thing is to recognize that whatever is going on for us and for our children, there are ways that we can support ourselves and them so that we can protect them and us from the impact of these times, so we can support ourselves and them through these times, and so that we can reduce the long-term impact that these times have on us, and especially on our children as well. And I know that that was one of the reasons why you invited me to have this conversation with you, so that we can support ourselves and each other, and especially our children.
Definitely. Thanks, Sean. That's a really good answer. And there's so many bits that I kind of want to pick upon from what you've said. And, you know, I think the main thing for me was when you're saying that we're all kind of getting used to it. Our bodies are getting used to being in this shutdown mode. And, you know, we came out of the first lockdown, the kids went back to school, they kind of got back into that safe and social, and then they had to go through it again, which I imagine is impacting deeper or in different ways. And you talked about that some children will have closed off at home, maybe be sitting in their bedroom not wanting to engage. Some children struggling with getting the homeschooling done, and maybe just going through the motions because they know it's what they've got to do, but they're not really feeling it in here. And I wanted to ask you that my second question was, you know, what are the main signs that a child is struggling? Obviously, they could be in the freeze response, they could be in the other response, which is the sympathetic. But are there any kind of symptoms or anything that parents can look out for that would say, my child is struggling?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great question. And to answer it, I just want to just step backwards a little bit, just to tie into part of the comments that you just made, and it ties in with how we notice how our children are struggling, actually, because like as we all know, and as I've just shown through how our nervous system works, like we are living through really stressful and challenging times. There is no doubt about that. Like the word unprecedented has been thrown about a lot in the last year, so was uncertain. And we as human beings don't like uncertainty because that's scary for us. We like to know where we are and what's going to happen. And when we don't, it can be really scary. Now, these times collectively are also traumatic as well. And we will absorb stuff from the environment and the people around us without us necessarily realizing or understanding, because we take on other people's feelings and experiences in lots of unique and different ways. So for many people individually, on an individual level, these times have been traumatic as well, because like there are so many, like parents are wearing many hats now at the moment, especially during lockdowns, where they are not just parents, the children are being educated at home, they working from home as well. Like some of them have got extended family living with them as well. So there's lots of different challenges going on in the home. For some, because of work and employment, there are a lot of basic survival needs that are under threat, like how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to feed my kids? And lots of other things. So on an individual level, there is a lot of people dealing with traumatic times as well. And like it's probably a really important piece just to drop in here, that trauma often gets misunderstood, and trauma isn't in what happens to us, it's in our nervous system and body's response to what happened. So it's essentially just something that happens too much, too soon, or too fast for our nervous systems to handle, and then what we hold on to in the absence of a compassionate witness. In other words, somebody lends us their capacity to be with that stuff so we can, because it's too much for us. So knowing that is really important when it comes to supporting our children, but also understanding what's going on for them and for us too, and being able to support ourselves, because our children have very limited capacity to feel safe on their own. The younger they are, the less capacity they'll have. And even an older child actually may not have much capacity. They may not have any capacity to feel safe on their own because of past experiences and developmental challenges that they may have as a result of that. So understanding that is really, really important, because it's not just about stress, it's not just about danger, it's about the fact that actually for a lot of people, they are experiencing traumatic experiences as well. So like if they're finding it really, really difficult to deal with or navigate stuff at the moment, that's why. It's not because you're doing anything wrong. It's not because you're failing as a parent or as a person or as an adult. It's because we are all collectively and individually dealing with a lot of stuff right now. And the reason I wanted to share that piece is because what happens in stressful, challenging, or traumatic times is that it also bubbles up to the surface previous experiences, previous traumatic, distressing, overwhelming, frightening experiences, some of which we may not be aware of. So the responses and the experiences we're having at the moment may not necessarily just be about what's happening in this moment. They could also be about stuff that's happened in the past as well. So this is particularly poignant at the moment with this lockdown, where children are home again from school and schools are closed, other than to vulnerable children or those of key workers, because a lot of people, whether it's adults or children, are still carrying the impacts of the previous lockdowns. It's not just about this one. And then they could also be carrying stuff from years ago that's impacting how the first lockdown and second one and this lockdown is affecting us. So understanding even just the basics of what's going on for us and our kids, and then having more compassion for ourselves and our kids is so, so important, as for each other as well, because in recognizing that everything that we think, feel, and do isn't because of who we are or what we're doing, it's because of what's going on in our nervous system and within our bodies. And just knowing that bit helps us have so much more compassion for ourselves and each other. And that can actually reduce our stress and anxiety from the offset as well, because we know that it's not our fault. We're not to blame. It's just our body trying to protect us. It's our child's body trying to protect us in the best way they can. So to answer your question, which was about how this shows up, the best way of understanding how it shows up is actually just to look at our stress physiology, to look at our what we'd call autonomic or physiological states. In other words, those three parts of our nervous system. So it's like when we are in a more sympathetic energy, like I said, it's going to be about movement. So how will this show up with maybe, say, like a child is struggling, or we are, or how that's manifesting, because it often, especially for children, it tends to be more noticeable through their behavior. And then obviously emotions are tied in with that, but that doesn't necessarily need to mean behavior as well. But that's how it shows up the most for kids. So in a flight response, in a flight place more, this could be a child who struggles to sit still. They need to keep moving all of the time. Maybe they're feeling really anxious. Maybe they're worried about not being in school. They could be worried about what they're not doing, what they're missing out on. They could be worried about friends and family. There's lots of worries that could come into there as a result of where we are right now, but also it could be bringing up worries from the past as well. And one of the understandable worries that I'm seeing children experience is around being worried about parents and family members and whether they're going to be okay, because we can't hide or fake our nervous system responses from our children, but we can't also hide the stuff that's going on around them from them, and we shouldn't try to either. Like, as parents and caregivers, we often think we need to protect our kids from knowing about stuff. And actually, one of the most important things kids look to the adults around them for and need the adults around them for is to help them make sense of the world around them, the people around them, and the things that they're experiencing within themselves. Because they're little humans, they're developing, they don't have the ability to make sense of that for themselves. So often as the adults, we feel like we're protecting kids by not telling them stuff, by not having conversations with them, or because that doing so feels uncomfortable for us. But actually, when we don't do that, what happens is that our children make sense of it in their own ways, depending on their developmental capacity. And then as a result, they may make sense of things in a way that isn't most useful or helpful for them as a result. So it's really, really important, and this is part of how we support them actually through anything, not just these times, is it's really, really important to have age-appropriate, honest and open conversations with our kids when they are ready to as well. because one of the things we all want is to know what's going on for our kids, to support them. And it can feel really distressing. We can often feel helpless and frustrated as well when we don't know what's going on for our kids. And it's an important part to understand here that our kids need to feel safe enough in the environment and with us in order to be able to have those conversations, in order to be able to share that stuff. So if a child doesn't want to talk about something right now or any time in the future, or they don't want to express, or they're shutting down to it or fighting you over that, it's important to recognize that they don't feel safe enough to be able to right now. And when they feel safe enough, then they will be able to. So it's really important that we understand, as you know, my whole philosophy is, it's really important we understand what's going on for them and for us, and then we meet them where they are, not where we want them to be, and not necessarily without fixing or changing things for them either, because they don't need us to fix things. They don't need us to change things. What they need to know is that they're not on their own, and we're going to be there with them, and we're going to keep them safe. We're going to support them. And that's actually one of the biggest threats that we have as human beings, is not having that, which is why being in shutdown or our lockdowns are so distressing and challenging for so many people, because we feel more isolated, we feel more alone, we may not be able to connect with people in the ways that we normally connect and feel safer. We also may have had some of the distractions that help us feel safer stripped away from us as well. So anyway, I've digressed. To go back, so more flight-based behaviours, like I said, it's going to be about the need to move.
Yeah.
And this can show up as movement bubbling up inside your body, which is essentially what anxiety is.
Yeah.
Like and this is a very simplified understanding of anxiety, is that it's basically where we overestimate a threat. And when I say we, I don't mean us personally. This is about our bodies and our nervous system. So it's not something that we're doing. It overestimates a threat and underestimates our ability to deal with that. So it could be about it underestimating our skills to be able to navigate that. Maybe developmentally we're not able to navigate that yet. Or it might mean not being able to know and trust that other people are going to be there for us if we're dealing with stuff. And actually just that piece can bring this is a bigger threat. Because if we're going to be on our own, we haven't got the skills to navigate that, we're not going to feel safe enough, then this is going to be a bigger threat to us. So that's kind of a really basic understanding of what anxiety is that will be really helpful and useful for some people, I would have thought. So more fight-based behaviours, and how the struggles of lockdown and our times can show up with kids is more like they may be saying no to you more on a really basic level. And actually, like, that little word is incredibly powerful. It can be really difficult for the adults around children because it brings up loads of stuff for us. But it's actually a really useful word, because what it's showing us is that something isn't okay for our children. It's either showing us that they don't feel safe, it's showing us that they don't have the skills to be able to navigate this thing yet, or in this moment. It's showing us that maybe they haven't developmentally reached a place where they can navigate that at the moment, or maybe because of what's going on, it's developmentally pushed them back into, or taken them back into a time where they're developmentally not able to. So one of the things that we've been seeing a lot over the past year, not just through this lockdown, is a lot of regression within children. So that essentially means going back to earlier behaviours, earlier ways of playing, earlier ways of doing or experiencing things. So I know, like, many parents have been experiencing challenges with children having problems with toilet training, and maybe children who have been dry for years are all of a sudden being having accidents through the day or through the night now. It might be children that are needing or wanting to sleep with parents that are maybe older. It could be wanting to play in different ways. It could even be talking in ways that are a lot younger than that child is actually chronologically in their age. So that's happening a lot over the last year. And it's really important to understand with that that's what's helping your child feel safe right now. So that's not a bad thing. It's not a wrong thing. Just let them do that and meet them where they are, and know that as they feel safer again, they will naturally come back out of that. So as part of this, like, this is part of the behavior thing overall, is that what we want to do, and the most useful thing for us to do as well, is to understand what's driving a child's behavior, and then meet them where they are and bring safety in our relationship with them, whether we're a parent, whether we're a teacher, whether we're any other adult or caregiver around them. Because when they feel safe enough, those behaviors will naturally change.
Thanks,
If we try,
and I imagine that the freeze response is the total opposite to the other response that you talked about, that children, they don't want to engage, they don't want to talk, they don't want to go outside. And I imagine that's quite an unsafe space to be as well, when you've totally disengaged.
Yeah, it can be, and it can be for children and for the adults around them as well. So again, like this could be immersing themselves in, and this is where you can have a combination of and a flavor of a few things together as well. It's not necessarily as clear cut as, well, it's fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn. It could be a combination and a flavor of a couple of those things coming together. So it could be like my child wanting to not feeling able to engage with anybody at the moment. Like, I'll give you a really great example. When the first lockdown happened, one of the amazing mamas that is in my online communities, her little boy is 5, and she was shielding during the first lockdown. And as a result, they weren't able to see any family members, they weren't able to see any friends. And he was refusing quite vitally to engage with any phone calls, with any video calls. And she was naturally worried about, like, well, like, he's not socializing with anyone, he's not speaking to anybody and thing. But actually what was really going on for him was that speaking to them was it made him feel too unsafe, because what speaking to them was doing was actually reminding him that he couldn't see them. He wasn't seeing them as normal, and he was missing them. He was feeling sad. And actually what was really interesting as part of that was that we do regular Zooms through our community, and he knows my voice and my face because he sees me on there a few times. And also he knows how much safer his mum feels when she's on there and when she's been on with us as well. And over the course of a few weeks, I built quite an amazing relationship with him, and he was able to come on Zoom calls with me and with us in our community and really engage. And it wasn't that he didn't feel safe enough to use videos, or he was being naughty, or he wasn't doing what anybody wanted him to do. It was that actually speaking to friends and family was just too much for him. And things like that's just one example, but it's an example of how stuff can show up in loads of different ways for our kids. So it could be like our children not wanting to engage with the stuff that they normally engage with, not wanting to play with things that they normally do the things that they normally do. I know some parents are struggling to get their children outside to do exercise or things. And it's important to recognize that that's not a reflection of you, your parenting of your child. It's a reflection of what your child is experiencing in this moment. And the most important thing for us is to not change that, to not try and fix that, but to meet them where they are, and to know that it's okay if we're doing things in a different way at the moment. What's most important is that we do things in the way that supports ourselves and our children in the best possible way. Because that's what we need the most right now. Like all expectations and pressures of what we should be doing, what life should look like, it should go out the window at the moment, because
that's really good advice, because even me as a parent and as a teacher and everything, all the hats that I wear, I still feel guilt. I still feel I should be doing this. I'm not doing this right. And I imagine every single parent across the country feels that. I think it's natural for us as parents to feel guilt over what we're doing, what we're not doing, what we should be doing. And I think that kind of partly answers the next question of, you know, what as parents can we do to help our children? And it's all about, like you say, getting rid of the guilt and not feeling guilty. And like you were saying, Sean, meeting our children where they are, being available for our children. I mean, what other things that springs to mind, Sean, as parents? What can we do to support our children?
And this is like the most important part of it, really, when up past the understanding, is because yes, the understanding is useful. It helps us have more compassion for ourselves and support ourselves and our children. But it's like, what can we do? And actually knowing what we can do, and even knowing that we can do stuff in the first place, is really empowering for us as parents and professionals and caregivers, because it's thinking that we can't do things and that we're helpless, and think that is that shutdown physiology of the I've got no choices, I can't do anything about this, nothing's going to change. So just knowing that we can do stuff can actually bring a huge glimmer of hope into people's lives, especially at the times when they need it the most. So there are kind of three things that I've been that are most useful, and I've been saying to parents throughout the whole year, actually, but even more important right now. And the first, and this is often one that we neglect, and because we've got so much to do, and because our children are so important to us as well as parents, is the first and most important thing we can do is to take good care of ourselves. Because if we're not taking good care of ourselves, then that has an impact on us being able to take good care of our children and being able to support them. We often leave ourselves behind, and we're like, well, I need to do all the things to support them first. But it's like that oxygen mask on a plane thing. If we are not supporting ourselves, number one, it impacts on our ability to support our kids. But number two, if we're not taking good care of ourselves and supporting ourselves, then what happens is our body and our nervous system could well be sending out danger and threat cues to our children unintentionally and through no fault of our own, that is actually going to have an impact on our children and their behavior too. So that piece of the puzzle is really, really important. And it is often ones that we neglect. And like self-care I know, you know, self-care gets talked about a lot these days, but I'm not talking here about like necessarily having a bath or having a cup of tea or going out to do something, or whatever that looks like for you. Although these things are useful and they can be useful, self-care in its most basic form is actually about taking care of ourselves. So it's about going to the loo when we need to go to the loo, getting something to eat when we need something to eat, taking moments throughout our day for a pause and a reset, and just to be with ourselves and be there for ourselves, so that things aren't getting on top of ourselves as much, and we have a bit of a break. Like you said quite rightly, people are under so much pressure right now. There are a lot of expectations, a lot of stress, and it can be so tempting when we've got more on to do more things and to keep going and to do things faster. And that actually makes things harder for us and our children. So the more, this is going to sound really counterintuitive for some people, but the more things we've got on, the more things we need to do, actually, the more we need to slow down. Because if we don't slow down and we go more quickly, it will slow down our ability to be able to do those things, and it will impact our ability to be present for ourselves and our children. And that's what our children need the most. They don't need all of the things. what they need the most is but the adults around them to be present for them and to bring that sense of safety within the relationship that not only they need the most, but is also what's going to protect them the most through these times and then help them navigate the impact of them as well. So that's the first thing, and it's really, really important. And then the second thing is about, like I said earlier, it's about being present and meeting our kids where they are. It's about having enough or working towards creating them, because I know for some people they're in very challenging situations at the moment with everybody being home together under one roof, is about increasing the number of positive interactions that we have. So on one end of the scale, this is about having good quality connection time with our kids. It doesn't necessarily need to be all day, every day. Like parents, like I don't want parents to think that this is one extra thing that they need to do, but it's an important part of how they support themselves and their children, actually, because like I said, we're wired for connection. We're wired to engage with others. And actually, we often underestimate the impact just spending time with our kids has for them, but also for us as well, because then we're getting that social interaction that we need and desire and want so much. And like I said, we need within us to be able to learn, to develop, to grow and thrive as well. So this could look like 10 minutes, quarter of an hour of just doing something with our kids that they enjoy doing. And that's the key, by the way. It's something that they want to do, not us. It means putting our phones to one side, turning our phones off or whatever, and modeling that to our kids and saying, look, I'm going to put this away because it can be really hard sometimes if it's beeping or comes up, and I want to be here present with you because you're important to me and you matter. So it could be like doing anything or anything, but also it could be taking steps towards that. So if things in our household are really fractured at the moment, it could be about just building small positive interactions so that we're working towards that step by step. And then when, as part of that, being there for our kids when they need us, being approachable. And like I know as parents, as a parent myself, and also as a professional, it's one of the things that we want the most, whether we're parents or caregivers or professionals. We want to be approachable. We want our kids to feel that they can approach us and come to us. And when they do, when I say meeting them where they are, like I said, it's not necessarily about fixing things. It's about leading with compassion and being there with them so that we're not taking away their pain. We're not taking away their struggles. We're seeing and hearing them, and we're holding space for them to safely express them so that they can move through them and then make sense of them, and then over time integrate those experiences. It's not about protecting them from feeling stuff. It's about them knowing that they're not alone in feeling that stuff. And often as adults, we need help and support in doing this ourselves, because many of us have been taught and conditioned, often from little ones ourselves, to distract ourselves from that, to numb ourselves out from that, to not feel stuff, because like we were both brought up in the age, weren't we, where children were seen and heard, or seen and not heard, and like good boys and girls didn't cry and didn't express their emotions. And we now know that actually that's the opposite of what children need. And so many of us are working hard towards being able to support. So like I said, having open and honest conversations with our kids, knowing that it's okay to not have the answers. Like if your child is saying to you, Mum, when can I go back to school? Knowing that it's okay to say, I don't know. And actually your child doesn't need you to know. Mm-hmm. What they need to know is that whatever's going to happen, you're going to be there for them. That's what they need to know the most, and that they're going to be supported. They're not going to be on their own.
And that's really good advice. My doorbell's going, Sean, but I'm not going to answer it. I don't want to interrupt this video. But what, moving forward to children going into school, that's something that us as teachers that we can do, is be available and and present for those children. And that's kind of leading me into the next question, you know, how can we help children make this transition from going from lockdown, where they've either been in that sympathetic mode or shutdown mode, back into the classroom where there's going to be lots of things going on?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like, they're all great questions. And this ties in with what I've just said, actually, about how we support them, full stop. And there's also a really, really important piece of that, and that's having realistic expectations. So whether it comes to what our children or us are experiencing right now, whether it's transitions or anything else, it's about having really realistic expectations. Like I said, parents are wearing a lot of hats at the moment, and things are really stressful and challenging for some of them. It's worth noting that for some of them, and for the children, actually these times are less stressful because there's less demands on them and less stresses coming in, which means that actually it's been really useful and helpful and supportive for parents and children. So it's really important to note that one as well, because it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's struggling through these times. There have been beautiful opportunities in these times for connection and reducing stress, which can seem a bit weird because there is so much stress around us. But so many parents and children are benefiting from that as well. So having realistic expectations of what's going on and what's possible for us and our kids is really, really important. And like I said, understanding that our survival responses and our survival physiology works in a hierarchical way. So we move down it in a prescribed way and we'll come back up through it in a prescribed way. And understanding that as things start moving, as our children transitioning back to school, or as they go back to school, there is going to be stuff bubbling up for them and for us. And some of these things may be stuff that we're not expecting. So expect the unexpected. And like I said, it's about just taking small steps to support them and understand where they are. And as part of this, and this doesn't just go for the transition, it also goes for the current situation we're in at the moment, because like you said, at the moment, the indication is that the earliest schools will go back in England is the 8th of March. It could be later. None of us know at the moment, at the time of recording this, what's going to happen, do we? It's all purely speculation at the moment. So when it comes back, to going back, or the situation that we're in at the moment, what we need to recognise is that the most important thing to our children right now is not their education. The most important thing to our children right now is actually supporting their health and well-being and their needs, because they need that in order to be able to learn. Because children who are feeling stressed don't learn. Children who are around stressed adults don't learn. The only things they do learn are about survival. So we also need to recognize that, like, if our children aren't doing any learning at the moment, that's okay if that's what's best for us and for them. And it's not necessarily mean that our children are going to be behind. It's not going to necessarily have a huge impact on their future. The biggest thing that's going to have an impact on their future is their stress levels and their ability to feel safe and their ability, how well supported they feel. That's the most important thing right now, but especially as we transition, because there's going to be a lot of things going on for them. Like at the moment, like neither of us know what it's going to look like for schools, because there's been no guidance yet around what that's going to look like. Like if we look back on what it was like going back after the first lockdown, children are moving back into very different environments.
Yeah.
They're moving from the home environment, which was very safe and controlled, and they couldn't go out very much, to then all of a sudden going back into a classroom where there's loads of people around them. These invisible threats could be around them. There could be dangers coming in for them that maybe they're not used to, that maybe haven't been there before. So as the adults around children, understanding that is really important, because there could be a whole host of stuff coming up. So again, us having realistic expectations about that and being prepared for that ourselves, so that we can support ourselves and then we can support our children or the children that we're caring for, is really, really important, so that we can help them navigate that transition and help ourselves navigate it as well. But also then so we can help our children prepare for that as well. Like, some children will need more preparation and planning for this than others. Like, as you know, like some like autistic children, for example, may need to have a very precise schedule of knowing exactly what's going to happen, and not having that could be a huge danger and threat for them when they're going back. So again, it comes back to having open and honest conversations, and not being afraid to not know the answer to something as well, knowing that that's not what our kids need. But a big part of the transition, and coming out of lockdowns full stop, and our lives transitioning as a whole, but especially with kids going back to school, is that we may see more challenging behaviours. We may see more anxiety in our kids. We may see more withdrawn behaviours. We may see lots of different things. So again, this just comes back to what we've been talking about how lockdown could be impacting anyway. That's how it could be impacting them when we transition back, but it could be more pronounced. For some people, for some children, it could be less.
Yeah.
Because actually going back to school could bring them more safety and more security. So again, this isn't a one size fits all. It's all about very individual and unique experiences and how it impacts that unique child. And then us as the adults recognizing what's going on for them, and bringing, first and foremost, bringing them a sense of safety. So that doesn't necessarily mean getting them to do all the things we want them to do. That means, well, actually, what's getting in the way of that? What's holding them back from doing that? What do they need to feel supported and safer so that they can move towards that? So it all comes as part of the same puzzle, really, is if we understand, and as you know, this is the whole ethos of everything that I teach and do. When we understand what's really going on for us, for our children, and for the people around us, it changes the way we think about things, it changes the way we look at stuff, and it changes the way we relate to things. And as a result, that changes and can change the way we respond to stuff. So that's why I kind of wanted to go into a little bit more detail on a couple of things, because I think it's going to be really, really useful, not just for parents, but for teachers and for schools and for caregivers as a whole as well, to understand how things are impacting our children, how things are impacting us, and also how we can support ourselves and them through these times. Because like, even when children go back to school, it's not going to be over. It's like, this is an ongoing situation. We already know that we're going to be subject to restrictions for quite some time yet, even when things are moving. And the more we're able to resource ourselves as adults and take care of and support ourselves as adults in our own unique and individual ways, whatever they look like. So, like, as a parent right now, if that means that you're struggling with everything at the moment, if you need to feed your kids frozen pizza for 3 days this week, go do it. Like, if that supports you and your children, like, that's not going to have a lasting impact on them. It may go against your values or what you want to do. That does not mean that you're a crap parent. It means that you're doing the best you can with what you've got. And actually, everybody is doing the best that they can at any given moment with the resources that they have available. So, like, being kinder to ourselves and more compassionate with ourselves is more important now than it has ever been before. If that means, in order to navigate these times, your children need more screen time. If that means, in order to navigate these times, your children are doing less of their schoolwork, whatever that looks like, knowing that that's okay, and being able to navigate this as best as we can is the most important thing right now for every single one of us. And to know that if we're struggling, that's bloody understandable.
Because I mean, I've got a mantra, Sean, that our best is good enough, and that's something that I live by. And I think, going back to what you're talking about, transition, you know, a lot of schools now, as well as my own, are becoming trauma-informed schools. And knowing this, you know, we're not going to be hitting the children with, right, first day back, maths, geography, literacy. You know, we have this whole ethos around listening hour where the children come in and talk, and we reconnect with with our peers and our teacher. We talk about what's gone right, what's gone wrong, and we really dig deep into feelings. And I think that's the way that most schools are going to play this, is when children come back, is reconnect and see how the children are feeling. And like you said, meeting them where they are and just having this very slow approach into getting back to learning and working.
Yeah, and taking one step at a time. And it's beautiful. It's so great to see that that's what your school's ethos and approach is. And it's been so beautiful, actually, to see so many schools doing the same thing and already telling parents that, look, when your children come back, yeah, we don't know what's going to happen right now, but when your children come back, actually, the focus is going to be on play. It's going to be on connection. It's going to be on creative stuff and supporting that transition. Our focus isn't going to be on education. It's going to be on supporting the children coming back so that they can get to a place where they can learn again, and we can support their education. Because like we've said throughout this conversation, children need to feel safe enough to learn. And
I think that's the underpinning of everything. If our children feel safe, they are going to be able to learn. And what we don't want to do as teachers and educators is get children into school that don't feel safe, and we're asking them, right, now you've got to do this.
Exactly, because it's going to be
autonomy as well, isn't it?
It is. It's really important, and autonomy is an essential piece of the puzzle with child development, but and learning and growth as well. And it's also about we can ignore that often unintentionally, or push past it because of what we feel we should be doing, or what we're being told that we should be doing. And actually what happens is we just dismiss children and their experiences then. So in the shorter term, for some children, that may mean that they comply. For some children, that means that they're very quiet and they just do what they're told. For other children, it may mean incredibly challenging behaviour, and they're very obviously telling us that's not okay for them. But the reality is, if we do that, yes, they may be learning some things. But like I said, what they're going to be learning the most is about survival. And in a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, the impact of that could be devastating for them. So we need to understand and recognise why this is so important, because stress and trauma and challenges can have a huge impact on us as parents. But on our children, they can have a deeper impact because they are still developing, because they don't have the capacity to feel safe enough in some situations by themselves, because they don't yet have the skills to be able to develop stuff. They may not have the capacity yet to be with the intensity of feelings and experiences that they're going through. And without that, without supporting children step by step through that, then nothing else matters. Because it's all of that stuff that's going to have the biggest impact on their lives, if they do get it and if they don't. And that's what's the most important thing right now, is to, not just with children, but as adults ourselves, is to support needs, to support well-being, and to support mental, emotional and physical health in whichever way we need to, whichever way that looks like for us as individuals and for our children as individuals, and the individual children within our classrooms. And I know for teachers that's incredibly challenging, because they've got a lot of kids in one classroom and they're going to have a load of kids coming back together who are going to be dealing with and experiencing a whole load of different challenges. So none of this is going to be easy for anybody, whatever the situation is. But knowing that we can take small steps towards understanding and supporting ourselves and our children really does make the difference. And actually it's the difference that makes the difference as well.
And I think, ending on that, just going over that, having that self-compassion for ourselves, for our colleagues, for the parents and for our children is going to be what sees us through this very tricky stage. And I just want to say thank you, Sean, for doing this interview. I've even learnt more than I thought I was going to learn. And I think, whoever's going to be watching this is going to get, whether that's teachers, whether that's parents, it's going to get a lot from this. So I'm just going to thank you again for allowing me to have a little chat with you around this, which I know it's something that's both very close to our hearts, that we both feel very passionate about, and you know, it's reaching as many people that we can to help them at this time as well. And I'm hoping that anyone who watches this is going to get so much from it. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you again for inviting me to have this important conversation with you, and thank you for sharing time and space with me as well. It's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege, and I truly hope that this is useful for parents, for caregivers, for teachers, for any other professionals who are supporting, caring for, or working with children. Because, like I said, at the moment, not just at the moment, but all times, understanding what's really going on, and then being able to meet ourselves and the people that care about, and especially our children, where they are, is so, so important. So thank you. Thank you. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to talk to you.
We may do this again at some point. So I'm just going to press the stop record button now.